the ages of Pokemon characters aren't really something the Pokemon team tends to hide from us. For example, with the use of simple math and the Pokemon timeline, we know that Red was 11 in his first appearance, 14 in Johto, 28 in Black and White 2, and lastly 30 years old in Sun and Moon. The manga is no different, is what I'd like to say, but if we go to Bulbapedia, we see weird stuff like Red was 16 as of the 13th chapter and blah blah blah. And then we go to the timeline and see that this chapter takes place before Sun and Moon, meaning it's not actually up to date, and then there's no clear-cut answer. So, in this video, my aim is to create a clear and easy to understand listing of all current Dex holders' ages in this timeline. However, when I say currently, I mean as of the 14th chapter, as we don't have enough information for the Sword and Shield chapters. This also means that Henry and Casey won't be included in this video. Now, one last thing I want to say is that I'm pretty bad with maths, so take these ages with consideration that I may be slightly wrong. And with all that said and done, let's begin. First off, we're going to start off with the youngest Dex holders. Coming at the age of 11, we have Sun and Moon. These guys being the youngest makes sense, as they're the most recent, but their age being 11 also makes sense because of the reason that to be able to take on the island trial, you have to be 11 years old. Nice and simple and easy to understand. Now let's move on to the next ones. Moving on, we now have X, Y, Blake and Whitley, who are all 12 years old. For X and Y, these ages of course make sense when looking at their height on the Dex holder chart. But compared to their game counterparts' unofficial ages, they're a whopping 6 years younger. For Blake and Whitley, I say they're 12, but we don't actually know how much time has taken place between the X, Y and Black and White 2 chapters. So for simplicity's sake, I'm going to say it takes place in the same year, meaning Blake and Whitley are joining the 12-year-old squad. Next, we have a big jump all the way to 16-year-olds, being Black and White. These two look and act their age. When they first debuted, they were 14, but since the Black and White 2 arcs take place 2 years later after the first ones, the two have grown, just like their friends Cherin and Bianca. And compared to the fanmade chart, this checks out perfectly. At this age, I can see Black being the Unova League champion after defeating Iris, and I can see White being an even more successful business owner. Now we move on to the Sinnoh gang, who are all now young adults, being 18 years old. As the Black and White arc takes place 2 to 3 years after the Platinum arc, I've decided to highball it and just have them be 18. Otherwise, it's 17. It would be nice to see these guys in the present, maybe in like a Legends Arceus arc. As for their jobs, Diamond and Pearl would definitely still be comedians, but Platinum on the other hand would probably be doing her duties as heir to the Bearlitz family. Or maybe something crazy, like being a champion, as we've seen her take on the gym leaders and the battle frontier of Sinnoh. Now we have our first solo trainer, being Emerald, who is 21. Yeah, this is very cursed. I can't even begin to imagine how he'd look. Would he finally be taller or would he remain short? I don't even know which would be a better option. As for his job, let's just say he's a frontier head. Just 1 year older than Emerald, we have Ruby and Sapphire, who are 22. I could see these guys being celebrities around Hoenn, with Sapphire maybe being the champion and Ruby being a contest champion, like how Wallace was. And I can definitely see these two finally dating. Next up, we have Johto. First off, I want to say the Johto Dex holders was 17 in the Heart Gold and Soul Silver chapter. And now, if we add on the years from the timeline, we have them now at the big age of 23. These ages honestly make a lot of sense considering when the games came out. But where would I see these guys? Well, for Gold, I can definitely see him working part-time as a Pokemon breeder, whilst also taking on odd jobs from Professor Oak and Professor Elm. Or on the other hand, his gambling paid off and he's finally living a rich life. Either one is entirely possible with little to no in between. Silver, I could see being part of the International Police, just like another character I'll be talking about in a while. Silver would definitely be responsible as an adult as he was responsible as a child. Definitely a man fighting for justice. Lastly is Chris. I can only really see her becoming a child carer or a professor's aide, as we've seen her doing both jobs. I could easily see her as a reliable person who helps anyone in need. Or maybe she'd be a professional Pokemon catcher, considering her skills. Now onto the other solo character, being Yellow, who would be 26, which is really crazy to think about, especially since we haven't seen her in so long. But as for what she would be doing, I honestly don't really know. Probably just living life one step at a time, fishing and sleeping. Or maybe she got with Red. In that case, I could see them living together or traveling together. Now for the main event, the one you've all been waiting for, the Kanto Dex holders. These guys come to the big age of 27. With these guys being 27, that makes sense considering the age of Red in the games. This art of the Kanto Dex holders in Alolan and attire looks really nice, and maybe that's exactly how they'd look. As for what they'd be doing, I can only really see Red as a traveler, For someone like him, the adventure wouldn't stop at the age of 27, and he'd probably go to countless of regions, taking on whatever challenges were around, and maybe he'd even save the world a couple times. Kinda like Ash, but actually aging. For Blue, he'd probably still be a gym leader, as there's no real reason for him to quit. And just like Red, I can see him lending a hand once in a while when the world needs saving. Like the X and Y chapter, for example. Actually, now that I think about it, Blue in the XY chapter is exactly how he would look like. That's him as a 27-year-old. So hey, the more you know. Lastly is Green. Green would probably still be a part of the International Police, just like Silver, as we saw her in the Black and White 2 chapters working there as a cameo appearance. And if we're going off by my timeline calculations, this is how she would look like as a 27-year-old as well. So the only other Kanto dex orders we haven't seen are red and yellow. And that's everyone. As I said, these calculations may be slightly wrong or completely wrong, as I didn't take in consideration how long the break was between certain arcs. For example, the Diamond and Pearl arc have a 2-week break between it and the Platinum arc. There's also the date they were born, so some characters may be 1 year older or 1 year younger. But instead of swearing the details, let's just hope I'm right. Thanks to the creators of the Pokemon Adventures timeline, I'll link to them in the description. Do you think that these ages are right? And do you think where I envisioned these guys working is correct as well? Let me know in the comment section down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. With all that said and done, take care.